For 7 years. My family invited me to dinner just to remind me I was the failure, the charity case who could not bounce back from a bad layoff. I took their insults because I thought I deserved them. But when my grandmother died, her will revealed the truth. I was not the one who needed charity. I was the distraction they used while they drained the family trust fund dry. And she left me the power to prove it. The fluorescent lights of the Maple Hollow Community Clinic always developed a distinct hum by 5 in the afternoon, a sound that drilled directly into the space behind my eyes. I sat at my desk in the billing department, staring at a rejected claim for a patient who had fractured his ankle 3 months ago. The insurance company was arguing about the necessity of the brace. I knew the code by heart. I knew the argument I had to write. This was my life now. Arguments over necessities, justifying why things cost what they cost. I was 33 years old. I had a degree in supply chain management that was currently gathering dust in a box under my bed. I had a car that made a rattling sound whenever I accelerated past 40 miles per hour. And I had a family that treated me like a cautionary tale they kept around to make themselves feel generous. My phone buzzed against the laminate desktop. It was a single, short vibration, but it made my stomach tighten. I knew that vibration. It was the Ross family group chat. I should have ignored it. I had 3 more claims to process before I could clock out. But the conditioning ran deep. Ignoring the family meant I was being difficult. Ignoring them meant I was having another episode. Ignoring them meant I was ungrateful. So, I flipped the phone over. It was a photo from my cousin Sarah's engagement party last weekend. I had been there, standing in the corner, holding a tray of empty champagne flutes because my aunt had asked me to help clear the tables since the staff looked overwhelmed. In the photo, the family was arranged in a perfect, smiling phalanx of expensive dental work and tailored wool coats, and there, on the far right edge, was a sliver of my shoulder and half of my face, looking down at a tray of dirty glasses. My brother, Grant, had captioned it. Great turnout for Sarah. Even our favorite charity case pitched in. Good to see everyone helping out. I stared at the words, charity case. They had been calling me that for 7 years. It started as a whisper after the layoff in 2019. Then it became a murmur after the medical debt swallowed my savings. And finally, it settled into a nickname after I had to move back to Maple Hollow and rent a room above a garage 3 streets away from the house I grew up in. I did not type a reply. I did not send an angry emoji. I did not defend myself. I learned a long time ago that defending myself only validated their theory. If I got angry, I was unstable. If I cried, I was fragile. If I pointed out that I was actually working at the party, not attending as a guest, I was being petty. Silence was the only rent I could afford. I locked my phone, finished the claim for the ankle brace, and clocked out exactly at 5:30. The drive home was gray. Maple Hollow was beautiful in the autumn, full of tourists looking at the turning leaves. But by January, the town was just a collection of wet roads and bare trees. I parked my rattling sedan in the driveway of the house where I rented my room. It belonged to Mrs. Gable, a widow who pretended she could not hear me coming and going, which was the greatest kindness anyone in this town offered me. Inside my room, I followed my ritual. I took off my clinic scrubs and folded them immediately. I washed my face with cold water. Then, I pulled the black composition notebook from under my mattress. This was my real life, the one nobody saw. I opened it to the page marked with today's date. I picked up a pen and wrote down the numbers. Debt remaining, $4,212. Savings for certification course, $850. Move-out fund, $300. I was slow, but I was moving. Every shift at the clinic, every freelance transcription job I did late at night, every dollar I did not spend on coffee or new clothes went into these columns. I was not a charity case. I was a woman digging herself out of a hole with a spoon, while the people standing at the top of the pit kicked dirt back down onto my head. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. The screen read Mom. I took a breath, counted to 3, and answered. Hello? Mom, I said. My voice sounded steady. That was the goal. Always steady. Hazel, Diane Ross said. She did not say hello. She never wasted breath on greetings when she had instructions. I hope you saw the group chat. Grant is so funny. He's just teasing. You know, he worries about you. I know. I said, listen, I am calling about Saturday. Grandma Evelyn's birthday. We are doing dinner at Lyndon and Ash. 6 o'clock sharp. Do not be late. Hazel, you know how anxious you get. And we do not want a scene. I am never late. Mom, I said, keeping the edge out of my voice. Well, just make sure and wear something nice. Not that gray sweater you wear to work. We have important conversations coming up. The family needs to present a united front. What kind of conversations? I asked. Money conversations, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that wasn't actually secretive. Estate planning, legacy, the foundation, things that are over your head. Sweetie, but we need you there to look supportive. It is for Grandma. You owe her that much. Do you not? After everything she has done for you? The guilt hook, it was her favorite lure. I will be there. I said, good. And Hazel? Try to smile more this time. You looked so sour in the photos from Sarah's party. It makes people talk. She hung up before I could say goodbye. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at my notebook. $4,212. I closed the book and slid it back under the mattress. I would go to the dinner. I would smile. I would be the prop they needed me to be. Because as long as they thought I was small, they would not look closely at what I was doing. Saturday arrived with a biting wind that rattled the windows of my apartment. I dressed carefully. I did not own expensive clothes anymore, but I had kept one black dress from my life before the crash. It was simple, well cut, and 5 years old. I paired it with the only pair of heels I had left and drove to Lyndon and Ash. The restaurant was the kind of place that smelled of truffle oil and old money. The lighting was dim, the tablecloths were heavy linen, and the menu had no prices listed for the specials. My family was already seated at a long table in the center of the room. There was my mother, Diane, wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my car. There was my brother, Grant, leaning back in his chair with the easy confidence of a man who has never had a check bounce. There were my cousins, Sarah and Mike, and my Aunt Linda, and at the head of the table sat Grandma Evelyn. She was 82 today. She looked small in the high-backed leather chair, her white hair pulled back in a severe bun, her hands resting on the head of her cane. Her eyes, however, were not small. They were sharp, dark, and moving constantly, scanning the table like a radar dish. "Hazel!" Grant boomed as I approached. He stood up, but not to hug me. He gestured to the empty chair at the very end of the table, near the kitchen service door. "We saved the VIP spot for you." "Thank you." "Grant," I said. I kissed Grandma Evelyn on the cheek. She smelled of lavender soap and old paper. Her hand came up and patted my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You look thin." "Hazel," she said. Her voice was scratchy but clear. "I am fine." "Grandma, happy birthday." "Sit. Sit," my mother commanded, waving her hand. "We have already ordered appetizers." The dinner proceeded exactly as I had expected. I was not really a guest. I was a utility player. When the appetizers arrived, Aunt Linda handed me her phone. "Hazel, take a picture of us," she said. "You have the best angle from down there." I stood up, took the photo, and sat back down. 5 minutes later, my mother signaled me. "Hazel, pour more wine for Sarah. The waiter is busy." I stood up, poured the wine, and sat back down. When the main courses arrived, the conversation turned to business. Grant started talking about his real estate investments, using loud, buzzing words like leverage and equity and market correction. He was performing for the table, but mostly he was performing for Grandma Evelyn. "I just think it is about stewardship," Grant said, cutting his steak. "We have a responsibility to grow what Grandfather left us, to take risks. Right, Mom?" "Absolutely," Diane said, beaming at him. "It takes courage to build wealth. Not everyone has that constitution." Her eyes flickered to me for a second. Just a second. I looked down at my plate. I was eating the chicken because it was the cheapest entree. Even though Grant had ordered filet mignon for himself and the cousins. How is the job? Hazel? Cousin Mike asked. He was peeling the label off his beer bottle. It is fine, I said. Busy? Still in billing? He asked. Yes, that is good. Stable? Mike nodded, his voice dripping with condescending kindness. It is brave of you to keep going with that. I know a lot of people would have given up after, well, everything. I kept cutting my chicken. I did not look up. And have you looked into government assistance again? Aunt Linda asked. She said it sweetly, leaning forward, her pearls clicking against the table edge. I saw an article about new programs for single women in distress. I could send you the link. It is nothing to be ashamed of. Honey, we all need a hand sometimes. I felt the heat rise in my neck. They did this. They laid out the bait, waiting for me to snap, waiting for me to say, I do not need assistance. I pay my own bills. I am fine. But if I said that, they would sigh and exchange looks that said, there she goes again, so defensive. Thank you. Linda, I said, that is very thoughtful. Grant laughed. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and threw it on the table. Don't worry about it, he announced, his voice booming so the next table could hear. Tell you what, I am covering Hazel's meal tonight. Put it on my tab. Family looks out for family, right? He looked around the table, waiting for the applause. My mother reached over and squeezed his hand. You are such a good brother. Grant, I felt like I was shrinking. I felt like I was dissolving into the chair. I wanted to stand up, throw two $40 bills on the table, and walk out. But I didn't. I had $4,212 of debt. I could not afford to throw $80 away on pride. Thank you. Grant, I said. The dinner wound down. The cake was served. The waiters sang. I collected the wrapping paper from the gifts and stacked the plates because the busboy looked overwhelmed, and I could not help myself. As the family began to bundle up in their coats, shuffling toward the valet stand, I felt a hand on my wrist. It was Grandma Evelyn. She had remained seated while the others moved toward the door. She pulled me down so my ear was level with her mouth. Stay a moment, she whispered. I waited until my mother and Grant were arguing about who would drive the Mercedes. Then I knelt beside Evelyn's chair. Did you have a nice birthday, Grandma? She ignored the question. She reached into the pocket of her tweed blazer and pulled out a small object. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers over it. I looked down. It was a key. It was old, brass, with a tarnished head, strung on a piece of simple red ribbon. What is this? I asked. She looked at me, her dark eyes clear and unblinking. If anything ever happens, she said, you will know what it opens. I frowned. Grandma, what are you talking about? She leaned closer. Her breath smelled of peppermint tea. I have a question for you. Hazel, a specific question. Do you still have that envelope from 2019? The year hit me like a physical blow. 2019, the year the factory closed, the year I lost my job as a logistics manager, the year I got sick and the insurance lapsed and the bills piled up until they blocked out the sun. The year I came back to Maple Hollow with my tail between my legs. I do not know what you mean. I stammered. Which envelope? She studied my face. She was looking for something. The yellow one, she said. The one from the relief fund. I shook my head. Grandma, I don't remember a yellow envelope. I don't remember much from that year. It's all a blur. She let out a small sigh, a sound of frustration or perhaps resignation. She released my wrist. Keep the key. Hazel, keep it safe. And do not tell your mother. Hazel. Diane's voice cut through the air from the entryway. We are leaving. Do not make Grandma wait. Evelyn patted my hand one last time. Go. And remember, Hazel, they think you are small. I looked at her. That can be useful, she said, if you do not start believing it. I drove home in silence. The key sat in the cup holder of my car, the red ribbon looking bright and out of place against the gray plastic. 2019. Why had she asked about that year? I tried to replay the months in my head: the panic of the layoff, the scramble to find work, the letters from the bank, the eviction notice from my apartment in the city. I remembered envelopes, hundreds of them, most of them white, with clear plastic windows that showed the words past due or final notice. I did not remember a yellow one. I pulled into Mrs. Gable's driveway, but I couldn't go inside. I felt unsettled. The way Evelyn had looked at me, it wasn't pity, it was intensity, it was expectation. I turned the car around. I had to go back. I had to apologize for rushing off. But mostly, I had to ask her what she meant. Evelyn lived on Marigold Lane, in a sprawling Victorian house that had been in the Ross family for 3 generations. It was too big for one woman, but she refused to leave. When I pulled up, I saw my mother's car in the driveway. I hesitated. I did not want to see Diane again tonight, but I needed to see Evelyn. I let myself in with the spare key under the planter, a security risk I had told them about a dozen times, which they ignored. The house was quiet. I walked down the hallway toward the sunroom, where Evelyn usually sat in the evenings. I heard voices before I saw them. I just think we need to be realistic. Mother, Diane's voice said. It was sharp, impatient. The foundation's legacy is at stake. You cannot just leave things open-ended. It is my money. Diane, Evelyn's voice replied. She sounded tired. It is the family's money, Diane corrected. And Grant has some very exciting ideas for the portfolio. We were talking to the people at Briarwood Legal Group. They said the updates to the trust can be handled quietly. We just need your signature on the amendment. I stepped into the doorway. Evelyn was sitting in her armchair, looking smaller than she had at the restaurant. Diane was standing over her, holding a glass of water and a pill bottle, looking like a nurse who was about to administer a lethal injection. "Oh," I said, "I am sorry. I didn't know you were still here." "Mom." Diane spun around. Her eyes narrowed. "Hazel, what are you doing here? You left 20 minutes ago. I forgot to say goodbye properly. I lied, and I wanted to check on Grandma." Evelyn looked up at me. Her eyes flickered to Diane, then back to me. A silent warning. "I am fine." "Hazel," Evelyn said, "your mother was just helping me with my medication." I stepped further into the room. It felt suffocating. "I can help with that." "Mom," I said, "you should go home. You look tired." Diane laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "I am not tired. Hazel, I am managing family business. Something you do not need to worry about. We were just discussing the future." She turned back to Evelyn. "We will come back tomorrow with the papers. Mother, think about what I said. Think about the tax implications. Think about what Grandfather would have wanted." Diane walked past me, brushing my shoulder with hers. She smelled of expensive perfume and aggression. "Good night, Hazel," she said without looking back. "Try not to tire her out. She is fragile." When the front door closed, the silence that rushed back into the room was heavy. I knelt beside Evelyn's chair again. "Are you okay?" I asked. Evelyn closed her eyes. She looked exhausted. The sharpness from the restaurant was gone, replaced by a gray fatigue. "I am old, Hazel, that is all." "What was she talking about?" I asked. "What papers?" "Nothing," she whispered. "Just noise. Diane likes noise." She opened her eyes and looked at me. Her hand reached out and touched my cheek. "You came back," she said softly. "I wanted to ask you about the envelope." She shook her head. A tiny movement. "Not now. Hazel, I am too tired. Just look. Look where?" "Everywhere," she breathed. She closed her eyes again, dismissing me. I sat with her for another 10 minutes, listening to the grandfather clock tick in the hallway until her breathing evened out into sleep. Then I let myself out into the cold night. When I got back to my room above the garage, it was nearly midnight. I was exhausted, but my mind was racing. Look everywhere. 2019. Yellow envelope. I turned on the overhead light. My room was sparse. A bed, a dresser, a small desk, and a closet. I walked to the closet and pulled open the door. On the top shelf, shoved behind a stack of winter blankets, was a plastic storage bin. It contained the wreckage of my life from 2019. Tax returns, medical bills, separation papers from my job, rejection letters. I hadn't opened it in years. It was too painful. I pulled the bin down. It landed on the floor with a heavy thud. I sat cross-legged on the carpet and popped the lid. The smell of stale paper wafted up. I started digging. White envelopes, blue envelopes from the hospital, manila folders with job applications. I went through the stack, my hands shaking slightly. September, October, November, the months of the crash. I reached the bottom of the bin. There was nothing yellow. I sat back, frustrated. Maybe she was confused. Maybe her mind was slipping. Diane had said she was fragile. I began to shove the papers back into the bin. As I grabbed a handful of file folders, a small, thin piece of paper slipped out from between two medical bills and fluttered to the floor. It wasn't an envelope. It was a receipt. It was a bright, carbon copy pink. But stapled to it was a small yellow tag. I picked it up. It was a return receipt from the post office. Certified mail. Date of delivery, October 14th, 2019. Recipient signature, D. Ross. Addressed, to Ross Family Relief Fund. I stared at it. October 14th, 2019. That was the week I had called my mother, sobbing, telling her I was going to be evicted. That was the week she had told me the family was illiquid right now, that everyone was struggling, that they couldn't help me. Ross Family Relief Fund. I didn't even know we had a relief fund. I knew we had the foundation, but a relief fund? I looked at the signature again. D. Ross, Diane Ross. My mother had signed for a certified letter addressed to a relief fund 2 days before she told me there was no money to help me. I turned the receipt over. On the back, in faint pencil, was a tracking number. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why did I have this? I closed my eyes and tried to remember. When I moved back, Mom had helped me pack up my apartment in the city. She had thrown things into boxes, organized my paperwork, purged the junk. She must have scooped this up by mistake. Or perhaps she had been holding it when she was at my apartment and it got mixed in. But what was it? They think you are small, Evelyn had said. That can be useful. I looked at the receipt again. It was a small piece of paper, meaningless to anyone else, but to me, in the silence of my rented room, it felt like the first loose thread in a sweater I was about to unravel. I wasn't just a charity case because I had failed. I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my notebook, beneath the list of my debts. I wrote a new line. Find out what the Ross Family Relief Fund is. I taped the receipt into the notebook. Then I took the key Evelyn had given me and hung it on the hook inside the closet door. Hidden behind my winter coat, I didn't know what had opened yet, but for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't just surviving, I was hunting. I turned off the light, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the wind, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel like rent I was paying. It felt like a weapon I was sharpening. The decline happened not like a cliff drop, but like a slow leak in a tire that you pretend not to notice until you are driving on the rim. 2 weeks after her birthday, Grandma Evelyn fell in her kitchen. It was not a dramatic fall, just a slip of a slipper on linoleum. But at 82, gravity is not a friend. She broke her hip. The surgery went well, but the recovery did not. Pneumonia set in, settling into her lungs like unwanted dust, heavy and stubborn. My life became a series of small, gray logistics. I worked my shift at the clinic from 8 to 5, and then I drove to the hospital. And later, when she was moved back home, to Marigold Lane, I became the keeper of the schedule. I knew which nurses were kind and which ones were rough. I knew that the evening pharmacist at CVS was named Robert, and that he always double-checked the interactions on Evelyn's heart medication without being asked. I knew that Evelyn preferred the blue blanket, not the red one, because the red one was wool and made her skin itch. My family, however, knew different things. Grant knew how to take a photo of his hand holding Evelyn's frail hand, cropping out the IV tube so it looked poignant but not gross. He posted it on Instagram with the caption, "The matriarch, the strongest woman I know. Keep fighting, Grandma. We are all with you." He posted it from the golf course. I knew this because he was wearing a polo shirt in the photo that he only wore for golf. And when he finally showed up at the hospital 3 hours later, he smelled of fresh grass and scotch. Diane knew how to manage the narrative. She created a group chat for updates on Mother that included 30 extended family members. She posted long, detailed paragraphs about Evelyn's condition that were mostly fiction. Mother is resting peacefully and surrounded by love. She wrote on a Tuesday when Evelyn had spent 6 hours coughing until her ribs ached. Gripping my hand so hard her knuckles turned white. I did not correct the posts. I did not comment. I just drove to the pharmacy. I picked up the prescriptions. I paid the co-pays with my own debit card because asking Diane for reimbursement required filling out a form she had invented, and I did not have the energy for paperwork. The house on Marigold Lane changed during those weeks. It became a headquarters. Diane and Grant began spending more time there, but not in the sick room. They set up camp in the dining room, spreading out laptops and file folders on the mahogany table. They drank Evelyn's expensive coffee and ordered takeout from Lyndon and Ash, charging it to the house account. They were affectionate when they came into the bedroom. They would smooth Evelyn's hair and call her Mama and Sweetheart. But the moment they stepped into the hallway, the masks dropped. I became invisible again, or worse, I became a utility. "Hazel, the trash needs to go out," Grant would say, without looking up from his phone. "Hazel, make sure you wipe down the bathroom counter," Diane would say. "We do not want germs spreading." One rainy Tuesday evening, I was coming down the back stairs with a basket of Evelyn's laundry. The house was old, and the acoustics were strange. Voices carried through the vents like secrets traveling through a tin can phone. I stopped on the landing because I heard my name. "Just worried about the access," Grant was saying. His voice was low, agitated. "She is spending a lot of hours in there alone with her. You know how Grandma gets. Sentimental. She is medicated." "Grant," Diane replied. Her voice was sharp, the sound of scissors cutting paper. "She hardly knows what day it is. Besides, Hazel is harmless. She is too busy trying to keep her head above water to play games." I gripped the laundry basket tighter. "I do not know," Grant said. "Desperation makes people do strange things. If she thinks she can get a handout, let her think what she wants." Diane said, "As long as she does not get ideas, we just need to keep her occupied until the trust amendment is signed. Once that is done, it does not matter what she thinks, as long as she does not get ideas." The words lodged under my skin like a splinter. It was not the cruelty that hurt. I was used to the cruelty. It was the dismissal. They did not fear me as an opponent. They feared me as a nuisance. I was a fly they were waiting to swat. I walked down the rest of the stairs, making my steps heavy so they would hear me coming. When I walked into the kitchen, they stopped talking immediately. Grant looked at his watch. Diane picked up a magazine. I put the laundry in the machine and started the cycle. I did not look at them. I kept my face blank, my movements slow and dull. If they wanted a charity case, I would give them one. I would be the tired, broken girl they expected. It was safer that way. The next day, Evelyn had a moment of clarity. It happened often in the mornings. Before the pain medication kicked in fully, I was fluffing her pillows, trying to get her comfortable, when she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was weak, trembling, but her eyes were focused. "Hazel," she rasped. "I am here, Grandma. Do you need water?" "The key," she said. "Do you have the key?" I nodded. "It is safe. At home, use it," she whispered. Today, I froze. "Use it? Where?" "Maple Hollow Savings and Trust," she said. "The main branch. Box 402. Go now, before Diane comes back." "I cannot leave you," I said. "The nurse does not get here until 10. "Go," she insisted. Her voice cracked. desperate. Please, Hazel, it is time. There was a frantic energy in her eyes that scared me. It was the look of someone who knew the clock was running out. I called the clinic and told them I would be late. I told them I had a flat tire. It was the first time I had lied to my employer in 3 years, and my stomach churned. But Evelyn's desperation was contagious. I drove to the bank. It was an old stone building on Main Street, the kind with marble floors and tellers behind high glass partitions. I walked downstairs to the safety deposit vault. The air down there was cool and smelled of dust and old money. I signed the logbook. The clerk, a man with thick glasses who looked like he had been working there since the 1950s, checked my ID. Evelyn Ross added you to the access list 6 months ago, he said, stamping the card. You have the key? I nodded and pulled it from my purse. The red ribbon looked cheap against the polished brass of the gate. He led me to a small private room and placed the long metal box on the table. Then he left, closing the door behind him. I stared at the box. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I expected jewelry. I expected maybe a stack of cash, Evelyn's emergency fund. I expected deeds to property I didn't know existed. I put the key in the lock and turned it. The mechanism clicked smoothly. I lifted the lid. The box was almost empty. There was no jewelry. There was no cash. There was only a thin manila folder lying on the metal bottom. I reached in and took it out. It was light. On the front, in Evelyn's shaky but elegant cursive, were the words, "For Hazel, read only when I am gone." I stared at the instruction. When I am gone. She was not gone yet. She was sick. Yes, she was dying. Probably. But she was still here. I felt a wave of nausea. Opening this felt like admitting she was going to die. It felt like betraying the hope that she might recover. And there was another fear, a darker one. What if the folder contained nothing but advice? What if it was just a letter saying she loved me and hoped I would get my life together? I had spent 7 years training myself not to hope for rescue. Hope was dangerous. Hope was the thing that made you sign up for a credit card you couldn't pay off because you thought a job was coming. Hope was the thing that made you believe your family when they said they wanted to help, only to find out they just wanted a photo opportunity. I could not open it. Not yet. I put the folder into my oversized tote bag. Underneath my change of clothes and my lunch, I closed the box. I called the clerk back in. I left the bank and drove back to Marigold Lane. The folder burning a hole in my bag. I told myself I would read it when I was home, in my room. With the door locked, I told myself I needed to be calm. When I got back to the house, Diane's car was in the driveway. She was standing on the porch, talking on her cell phone. She looked angry. "Where have you been?" she hissed as I walked up the steps. "You are 40 minutes late. The nurse is waiting to give a report. I had a flat tire." I said, repeating the lie, "You need a new car." "Hazel," she said, rolling her eyes. "That thing is an embarrassment. It leaks oil on the driveway." I walked past her, clutching my bag tight against my side. I went straight to Evelyn's room. She was asleep. The nurse was packing up her bag. She had a rough morning. The nurse said softly, very agitated, "Asking for you." But she settled down about 20 minutes ago. I sat by the bed. I watched Evelyn breathe. It was a shallow, rattling sound. I wanted to wake her up and tell her I had the folder. I wanted to ask her what was in it, but she looked so tired. I stayed until 6 o'clock. When Grant arrived with takeout Thai food, he did not offer me any. I went home, ate a sandwich over the sink, and looked at the folder. I almost opened it. I had my finger on the seal. But then I stopped. Read only when I am gone. It was a command, and Evelyn Ross did not give commands lightly. I slid the folder under my mattress, right next to my debt notebook. I would wait. I waited 3 days. The call came at 4 in the morning on a Friday. It was Diane. She is gone. Hazel. That was it. No preamble, no softness, just the fact. I sat up in bed, the phone pressed to my ear, looking at the dark window. I did not cry. That surprised me. I expected to wail, to collapse. But I felt nothing except a vast, echoing hollowness. It was as if someone had scooped out my insides with a melon baller and left only the rind. "When?" I asked. "About 20 minutes ago." Diane said, "The hospice nurse called us. We are at the house. You should come. There are things to do." Things to do. Of course. I got dressed. I brushed my teeth. I put on my shoes. I moved like a robot. If I stopped moving, I knew the reality would hit me. And if the reality hit me, I might not get back up. So I focused on the tasks: keys, wallet, coat, drive. The house was fully lit when I arrived. It looked like a party was happening, except everyone inside was wearing pajamas and grim expressions. Grant was already on the phone with the funeral home. Diane was sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad, making a list. "Hazel," she said without looking up. "Good. You are here. I need you to go through the closet in the guest room. There are tablecloths in there for the wake. And we need to find the contact list for the garden club." She did not hug me. She did not say, "I am sorry." She did not say, "We lost her." She handed me a job. I took the list. I went to the guest room. I found the tablecloths. The next 4 days were a blur of black clothing and hushed voices. The family dynamics, which had been fluid while Evelyn was alive, suddenly snapped into rigid, concrete shapes. Diane was the general, Grant was the lieutenant, and I was the private, sent to dig the latrines. Diane planned the funeral as if it were a coronation. She chose the most expensive casket, the most expensive flowers, lilies, which Evelyn hated because they smelled like funerals, and the most expensive catering package. We need to honor her legacy. Diane said, signing checks from the estate account. She assigned me errands like I was a junior employee she was thinking of firing. Pick up the dry cleaning, go to the florist and check the arrangement, drive Cousin Sarah to the airport. Grant was supportive in a way that felt like supervision. He hovered. Whenever I was alone in a room for more than 2 minutes, he would appear. "Doing okay?" "Hayes?" he would ask, leaning against the door frame. "I am fine." "Grant, just checking. It is a lot to handle. Do not want you getting overwhelmed." He was watching me. They were both watching me. They were waiting for me to crack. They were waiting for the instability to show up so they could point at it and say, "See? We told you." I did not crack. I ironed my black dress. I polished my shoes. I kept my face smooth and blank. The funeral was held at the Whispering Pines Chapel. It was packed. Evelyn had been a pillar of the community, a philanthropist, a force of nature. Half the town was there. I stood in the receiving line next to my mother. I watched her perform grief. It was a master class. She dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief that never seemed to get wet. She held hands. She nodded bravely. "Thank you for coming," she whispered to the mayor. "Mother loved this town so much. Thank you," she said to the bank president. "It is hard, but we are holding up." When people got to me, the script changed. They did not ask how I was. They did not ask about my loss. They looked at me with that specific, pitying tilt of the head that I had come to know so well. "Hazel, dear," Mrs. Higgins said. She was one of Diane's bridge friends. "You look, well, considering." "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins. Evelyn was a saint." The woman continued, lowering her voice. "She was so kind to take you in when you were having your troubles. You were so lucky to have her." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. "Take me in." As if I were a stray dog she found on the highway. As if I hadn't been paying rent to Mrs. Gable for 3 years. As if I hadn't been the one washing Evelyn's hair and cutting her toenails for the last 6 months while Diane was getting manicures. "She was a good woman," I said simply. The service was long. Grant gave a eulogy that was 70% about himself and 30% about how much Evelyn loved him. He told a story about her teaching him to invest in the stock market when he was 12. I remembered that story differently. I remembered her trying to teach him math and him throwing a tantrum because he wanted to go play video games. I sat in the front row, staring at the casket. I did not cry. I held the folder in my mind. It was sitting under my mattress. Read only when I am gone. She was gone now, really gone. The will reading was scheduled for the day after the funeral. Briarwood Legal Group, 10 o'clock in the morning. I barely slept the night of the funeral. I lay in bed, feeling the silence of the world pressing down on me. Evelyn was the only person who had looked at me and seen me. Not the failure the family had invented. Now I was alone. At 3 in the morning, I pulled the folder out. I sat on the floor, my back against the bed frame. I turned on the small lamp on my desk. I broke the seal. Inside, there was a single letter. It was handwritten, 5 pages long, on Evelyn's heavy cream stationery. My dearest Hazel, if you are reading this, I have left the party. Do not be sad. I was tired, and the music was getting terrible. I smiled. A real smile. The first one in weeks. I could hear her voice. I know what they call you. I know they call you the charity case. I know it hurts you. But I let them call you that for a reason. And for that, I owe you an apology. You see, Hazel, your mother and your brother are sharks, but they are lazy sharks. They only attack when they smell blood, or when they think something is being hidden from them. If they thought you were strong, if they thought you were successful, they would have come for you. They would have tried to use you, or break you, or borrow money from you. So I let them believe you were weak. I let them believe you were broken, because as long as they looked down on you, they weren't looking at you, and while they were busy looking down. I was watching them. I have seen the bank transfers. Hazel, I have seen the loans Diane took from the foundation that were never repaid. I have seen Grant's investments that were nothing more than gambling with family money. They think the will reading tomorrow is going to be a formality. They think I was senile. They think I didn't know. I knew everything. I have set a trap. Hazel, a very large, very specific trap. And tomorrow, at the lawyer's office, you are going to spring it. I have left you the power. Not just the money, though there is some of that, but the authority. You are going to find out exactly what they did, and you are going to decide what to do about it. Do not be afraid. You are not the charity case. You are the CEO of this cleanup operation. You are the only Ross with a spine. P.S. Trust Mara Klein. She is the only lawyer in that town who cannot be bought. I sat on the floor for a long time, the letter shaking in my hands. The tears finally came then. Not tears of grief, but tears of release. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't a failure. I was a sleeper agent. I arrived at Briarwood Legal Group at 9:30 the next morning. I was 30 minutes early. I wanted to scope out the terrain. The office was in a modern building on the edge of town, all glass and steel. It was sterile and intimidating. I told the receptionist my name. "Ah, Ms. Ross," she said. "Ms. Klein asked to see you as soon as you arrived." She led me back to a corner office. Mara Klein stood up as I entered. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense bob haircut. She was wearing a suit that looked tailored, not just expensive. "Hazel," she said. She did not call me Ms. Ross. She extended a hand. "I am Mara. I am so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said. She gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. We have a few minutes before the circus arrives." I sat. I was clutching my purse tight. The folder was inside. "I want to verify a few things before we begin." Mara said. She opened a file on her desk. She looked at me directly, her gaze intense but kind. It was the first time in weeks someone had looked at me without pity. "Hazel, have you ever signed a document authorizing a transfer of funds from the Evelyn Ross Community Grant Foundation?" she asked. "No," I said. "Never. Have you ever been a signatory on the Ross family trust accounts?" "No." "Have you ever authorized Diane Ross or Grant Ross to act as your power of attorney?" "No." Mara nodded slowly. She made a tick mark on her paper. "Good. That is what I needed to confirm." "Why?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my pulse was racing. "Because," Mara said, closing the file, "there are documents that exist with your signature on them. Or, I should say, with a signature that looks very much like yours." I felt the blood drain from my face. They forged my name? Mara didn't answer directly. She just leaned forward. Evelyn knew. Hazel. She told me everything. And today, we are going to make sure everyone else knows too. Are you ready? I thought about the group chat. I thought about the photo of me cropped into the corner. I thought about the charity case whispers. I thought about the letter in my bag. You are the only Ross with a spine. I took a deep breath. I sat up straighter. I adjusted the strap of my bag. I am ready, I said. Mara smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. Good. Then let's go into the conference room. It's showtime. We walked out of her office just as the elevator doors opened. Diane and Grant stepped out. They were wearing their funeral black, looking solemn and important. When they saw me walking next to the attorney, Diane's step faltered for just a fraction of a second. Hazel, she said, why are you back here? You should have waited in the lobby. I didn't answer. I just held the door to the conference room open for her. After you. Mother, I said, for the first time in 7 years. I didn't look down. I looked her right in the eye. And for the first time, she was the one who looked away. The conference room at Briarwood Legal Group was designed to make people feel small. The table was a slab of polished mahogany that looked long enough to land a plane on. The chairs were high-backed black leather that swallowed you whole. The windows offered a panoramic view of Maple Hollow, but the glass was tinted, turning the bright autumn sunlight into a cool, corporate gray. My family had gathered as if they were attending an awards ceremony where the prize was already guaranteed. My mother, Diane, sat at the head of the table, directly opposite the empty chair reserved for the attorney. She had draped her black cashmere coat over the back of her chair like a royal mantle. She was checking her makeup in a compact mirror, ensuring her grief looked suitably elegant. Grant sat to her right, tapping a gold pen against a leather notebook. He was wearing a suit that I knew cost more than my entire year's rent. He looked impatient, like a man who had important business to attend to and found this formality tedious. The rest of the table was filled with aunts, uncles, and cousins. Cousin Sarah was whispering to Cousin Mike about a ski trip they were planning for December. Aunt Linda was scrolling through her phone, probably checking the engagement on her latest condolence post. I sat at the very far end of the table, near the door. It was the seat usually reserved for the junior associate or the stenographer. No one had told me to sit there. I had just gravitated toward it out of habit. In the Ross family geometry, I was always on the periphery. When Mara Klein walked in, the room fell silent. She carried a thick leather portfolio and a stack of files. She did not smile. She did not offer condolences. She walked with the efficient stride of a woman who charged by the 6-minute increment and had no time for theater. She sat at the head of the table, moving Diane's coat without asking. Diane bristled but said nothing. Mara opened her portfolio. She took out a single, thick cream-colored envelope and slid it down the length of the table. It spun across the polished wood and came to a stop directly in front of me. Every head turned. "What is that?" Grant asked, his pen freezing in midair. "A copy of the current trust structure," Mara said calmly. "For the trustee?" Grant laughed. A short barking sound. "You slid it to the wrong end of the table. Mara, Mom is the trustee. Or me. We haven't decided the official title yet." Mara did not look at him. She looked at me. "Hazel," she said, "please keep that closed for a moment." I put my hand on the envelope. The paper felt heavy, textured. I could feel the eyes of my family on me. They weren't hostile yet. They were just confused. It was as if the dog had suddenly been invited to sit at the dinner table. Mara began to read. The early parts of the will were exactly what everyone expected. Evelyn was generous, but traditional. She left specific sums to the Maple Hollow Public Library, the Historical Society, and the church on Elm Street. She left $25,000 to the nursing staff who had cared for her in her final weeks. She left $5,000 to each of her grandchildren, myself included, which caused a ripple of polite murmurs around the table. "That is so sweet of Grandma," Sarah whispered. "I am going to put it toward the wedding." Diane nodded, dabbing her dry eyes. She was so thoughtful, always thinking of everyone else. The family relaxed. The tension in the room evaporated. They had heard what they wanted to hear. Evelyn was generous. The money was flowing. And the status quo was being maintained. They leaned back in their chairs, waiting for the main event, the reading of the residual estate, the foundation assets, and the family trust control. Grant winked at me from down the table. "Nice little bonus for you." "Hazel," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "do not spend it all in one place." I said nothing. I just kept my hand on the envelope. "And now," Mara said, her voice sharpening slightly, regarding the Evelyn Ross Community Grant Foundation and the Ross Family Revocable Trust. Diane sat up straighter. This was it. The coronation. Pursuant to Article 6, Section 4 of the amended trust document dated 2 weeks prior to her passing, Evelyn Ross has appointed a successor trustee to manage all assets, real property, and charitable holdings. Grant cleared his throat and adjusted his tie, preparing to look humble. "The successor trustee," Mara continued, reading from the document, "is granted full authority to audit all past accounts, freeze all current disbursements, and restructure the board of the foundation as they see fit. This authority is effective immediately." She paused. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the HVAC system. "The successor trustee is Hazel Marie Ross." For 3 seconds, nothing happened. It was as if the words had been spoken in a foreign language that no one in the room spoke. Then, the air left the room. Diane's face went slack. It wasn't anger at first. It was pure, unadulterated shock. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Grant dropped his pen. It clattered loudly on the mahogany. "Excuse me?" Grant said. He didn't boom this time. His voice was high and thin. "Hazel Ross is the sole successor trustee," Mara repeated. "She also holds temporary executive authority over the foundation, pending a full forensic audit of the last 10 years of activity." Diane stood up. She didn't mean to. It was a physical reaction, like touching a hot stove. "That is impossible," she snapped. Mother was not in her right mind at the end. She was confused. She didn't know what she was signing. Mara didn't blink. Evelyn Ross was evaluated by 2 independent neurologists on the day she signed this amendment. Both certified her to be of sound mind and clear intent. I have their affidavits here. Grant stood up too. He walked toward the head of the table, his face flushing a dark, angry red. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Hazel? Hazel can't manage a trust. Hazel can barely manage her own rent." "No offense, Hazel, but you are not exactly financial material." He looked at me, expecting me to agree. He expected me to shrink, to apologize, to say, "He is right. I cannot do this. Please take it back." I looked at him. I thought about the key in my pocket. I thought about the letter under my mattress. "You are the only Ross with a spine." I did not shrink. I sat perfectly still. Mara raised a hand. "Sit down, Grant. I am not finished." Grant hesitated, then sank back into his chair, glaring at me. Evelyn also included a specific clause regarding challenges to this will. Mara said. She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a second envelope. It was sealed with red wax. "This is a statement written by Evelyn Ross," Mara explained. "Her instructions are precise. If any beneficiary contests this will or attempts to remove the trustee through legal action, this envelope is to be opened and entered into the public record." Diane went pale. Her eyes locked onto the red seal. "What is in it?" she whispered. "I do not know," Mara said. "And if you are smart, Diane, you will make sure we never find out." The room turned sharp with tension. It was a physical weight, pressing down on our chests. The cousins looked back and forth between Diane and me, realizing for the first time that the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. Diane took a breath. She smoothed the front of her silk blouse. She forced a smile onto her face, but it looked like a rictus of pain. "Well," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We are certainly not going to challenge Mother's wishes. We are a family. We do not do that sort of thing." She looked at me, her eyes hard and cold. "Hazel knows what is right. She knows she is not equipped for this level of responsibility. I am sure she will do the right thing and delegate the authority back to the family members who understand the business." "Right, Hazel?" It was a threat disguised as a compliment. "Do the right thing." That was the phrase they always used to make me comply. Do the right thing and stay quiet. Do the right thing and take the blame. I looked at Diane. I looked at Grant. I looked at the cousins who had laughed at me in the group chat. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were sweating. Part of me wanted to throw up, but another part of me, the part that had survived 7 years of being the charity case, felt a strange, cold clarity. I turned to Mara. "Mara," I said. My voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "Yes." "Hazel? You mentioned the power to pause distributions." I said, "What does that mean?" "Exactly." Diane stiffened. Mara looked at me with a spark of approval in her eyes. "It means," Mara said clearly, "that as of this moment, no money leaves the trust or the foundation without your direct written signature, no monthly stipends, no salary drawdowns for board members, no reimbursement for expenses. All accounts are frozen until you are satisfied with the audit." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, the sound of a chair scraping back. Diane sat down heavily. She looked as if she had been slapped. Grant looked at his mother, then at me. "Wait," he said. "What about the quarterly distribution?" "That is due next week. I have commitments based on that. Those distributions are suspended," Mara said, "until Hazel clears them." "But," Grant sputtered, "that is, you cannot just cut people off. People have mortgages. People have bills." I looked at Grant. I remembered the text message he had sent me when I asked for help with my medical bills in 2020. "Sorry, Hayes, cash flow is tight right now. You know how it is." I turned to him. "I know. Grant," I said softly, "it is very stressful when you cannot pay your bills." Grant's mouth snapped shut. He looked at me as if I had just pulled a knife on him. Diane stared at the table. Her hands were gripping the edge of the mahogany so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was calculating. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was realizing that the faucet she had been drinking from for decades had just been turned off, and the handle was in the hands of the daughter she had spent 7 years calling useless. "This meeting is concluded," Mara said, closing her folder. "Hazel, I have arranged a meeting for you with the forensic accountant this afternoon. Ronan Pierce. He's expecting you at 2 o'clock. I stood up. I picked up the thick envelope Mara had slid to me. "Thank you, Mara," I said. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes boring into my back, hot and angry. I took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into the parking lot. The air was crisp and cold, a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere of the law office. I took a deep breath, trying to slow my heart rate. "Hazel!" I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. It was the ambush. Aunt Linda and Cousin Mike caught up to me at my car. Linda looked frantic. Mike looked annoyed. "Hazel, wait!" Linda grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into my coat. I stopped and looked at her hand until she let go. "What happened in there?" Linda started, her voice breathless. "You have to understand. Hazel, she is under a lot of pressure. She didn't mean to snap at you. I am sure." I said, "But listen, honey," Linda continued, lowering her voice to a confidential whisper. "You need to be careful. This power, it changes people. You do not want to be the one who destroys the family over money. I am not destroying anything. Linda, I am just following Grandma's instructions." "But freezing the accounts?" Mike interrupted. "Come on, Hazel, that is extreme. You know Diane relies on that stipend for the house maintenance. And Grant? Well, Grant has leveraged himself pretty hard on this new development deal. If the cash stops, He could lose everything. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. You do not want that on your conscience, do you? Seeing your brother ruined? The cruelty was so subtle I almost admired it. They were already reframing the narrative. If Grant lost his money because he made bad bets with family funds, it would be my fault for not bailing him out. I was being painted as the villain before I had even signed a single document. I unlocked my car door. I think Grant should have thought about that before he leveraged money he didn't technically have. I said, Mike's face hardened. You are enjoying this, aren't you? He sneered. Finally getting back at everyone. That is what this is. You are just bitter because you failed and we didn't. I looked at Mike. I remembered him at the birthday dinner, asking if I had looked into government assistance. I didn't fail. Mike, I said quietly, I was pushed, and now I'm going to find out who did the pushing. I got into my car and slammed the door. As I drove away, I saw them standing in the parking lot, watching me. They looked small in the rearview mirror, small and scared. I drove to a diner on the edge of town and ordered a coffee. I sat there for an hour, just breathing. I opened the envelope Mara had given me. It was full of legalese, trust structures, asset schedules, banking authorizations, but the summary page was clear. Total assets under management, $12,400,000. I stared at the number, $12 million. And yet, when I needed $3,000 for rent in 2019, the family was illiquid. I paid for my coffee and drove to the address Mara had given me. Pierce Ledger & Company was located in a small, nondescript brick building near the old industrial park. It didn't have the marble floors of the bank or the mahogany tables of the law firm. It looked like a place where work got done. I walked in. The reception area was empty, just a bell on the counter. I rang it. A door opened and a man stepped out. He was about my age, maybe a little older. He was wearing a gray sweater with the sleeves pushed up and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Hazel Ross? He asked. Yes, I am Ronan Pierce. Come on back. His office was a chaos of paper. Stacks of files covered every surface. Whiteboards on the walls were covered in diagrams and timelines drawn in red and blue marker. Sorry about the mess, he said, clearing a chair for me. I have been digging into the Foundation's records for the last 48 hours. Your grandmother gave me a head start before she passed. He sat down behind his desk and looked at me. He didn't look at me like I was a charity case. He looked at me like I was a colleague. How was the reading? He asked. Tense, I said. I bet. He spun his monitor around so I could see it. Okay, Hazel, here's the situation. I am only scratching the surface, but what I have found so far is problematic. He clicked a mouse. A spreadsheet appeared. This is a list of reimbursements from the Foundation's operating account over the last 5 years. He said, now, a foundation this size usually has overhead. Salaries, office space, travel for board meetings. That is normal. He pointed to a column of numbers. This is not normal. I leaned in. What am I looking at? You are looking at a debit card issued to the Foundation, primarily used by Diane Ross. He scrolled down. Linden and Ash Bistro, $400. The Spa at the Grand Hotel, $650. Designers Guild, $2,300. These are coded as donor cultivation or office supplies, Ronan said. But unless your donors are getting massages, this is personal spending. It gets worse, he said. He opened another file. Check the signatures. He pulled up 2 documents side by side. One was a check request from 2018. The other was a check request from 2021. The signature on the bottom read, Evelyn Ross, but they looked different. The first one was shaky, spidery, Evelyn's handwriting as I knew it. The second one was smooth, confident, and looped. That is not her signature. I whispered, No, it is not. Ronan said, It is a good forgery, but it is a forgery. Someone has been signing checks in her name for at least 3 years. He leaned back in his chair. But Hazel, that is just petty theft. Expensive dinners and fake signatures. That is bold. But it is not the main event. What is the main event? I asked. Ronan looked at me. He hesitated for a moment. I found something this morning. I wasn't sure if I should show you yet, because I'm still tracing the wire transfer, but, given the timing, I think you need to see it. He opened a PDF file. It was an invoice. Vendor: Coastal Horizon Properties. Description: Community Outreach/Retreat Location. Amount: $18,740. Date: October 12th, 2019. I stared at the date. October 12th, 2019. The date was burned into my memory. That was the day I had received the final eviction notice on my apartment door. That was the day I had called my mother, sobbing, begging for a loan of $3,000 to keep a roof over my head. I remembered her voice on the phone. "Oh, Hazel, I wish we could help, but the market is down, and the foundation's funds are strictly tied up in grants right now. We just do not have the liquidity. You understand? Do not you? You have to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I looked at the invoice again. Community outreach. Where is Coastal Horizon Properties? I asked. My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from underwater. Ronan clicked a few keys. It is a luxury rental agency in the Outer Banks, North Carolina, he said. I looked up the property record for that week. It is a 10-bedroom oceanfront estate with a private pool. He turned to look at me. Hazel, the week you were evicted, your mother and brother were on a vacation, and they paid for it with the money they told you they didn't have. I stared at the screen. The numbers blurred. $18,740. They hadn't just refused to help me. They had spent 6 times the amount I needed on a beach house, charged it to the charity, and lied to my face while I was packing my life into cardboard boxes. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't the hollowness of grief anymore. It was something harder. It was the feeling of iron hardening into steel. They called me the charity case, I said softly. Ronan nodded. Yeah, they did. I looked at him. Print it. I said, What? Print it out. Ronan, print all of it. Every receipt, every forged signature, every lie. I stood up. The trembling in my hands had stopped. I am not pausing the distributions. I said. Ronan looked surprised. You aren't? No, I said. I am canceling them. Permanently. I picked up my purse. Keep digging. Ronan, I want to know where every single penny went. I walked out of the office into the late afternoon sun. The wind was picking up, blowing dead leaves across the parking lot. I buttoned my coat. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Diane. Hazel, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Come to the house for dinner. We can work this out. I looked at the message. Then I looked at the printout Ronan had handed me. The invoice for $18,740. I deleted the text. I wasn't going to dinner. I was going to war. The room Ronan Pierce worked in had become my second home. It smelled of stale coffee and printer toner, a scent that I was beginning to associate with the unraveling of my entire life. We had established a rhythm. I would arrive at Pierce Ledger and Company straight from my shift at the clinic, changing from my scrubs into jeans in the bathroom, and we would dig. Mara Klein had filed the necessary motions to compel the bank to release 10 years of records. The boxes had arrived on a Tuesday morning, stacked on a dolly like a tower of bricks. We started with the board meeting minutes, according to the bylaws of the Evelyn Ross Community Grant Foundation. The board was required to meet quarterly to vote on all disbursements over $5,000. The minutes were supposed to be the official record of these decisions. I sat on the floor with a binder labeled 2021. I flipped through the pages. The paper was crisp, high quality. The font was professional. Meeting called to order. November 14th, 2021, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Location: Ross Family Residence, Marigold Lane. Attendees: Diane Ross, Chair. Grant Ross, Secretary. Hazel Ross, Member. I stopped reading. I stared at my name. Hazel Ross, Member. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through my calendar. I kept meticulous records. I had to. Because when you are poor, You cannot afford to miss a shift or a bill payment. November 14th, 2021. I looked at the entry. Double shift. Billing debt. 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I had not been at Marigold Lane at 4 o'clock. I had been sitting under the fluorescent lights of the clinic, arguing with a Medicare representative about a denied claim for a walker. I flipped the page. Motion to approve grant of $12,000 to the Maple Hollow Heritage Festival. Motion seconded by Hazel Ross. Vote, unanimous. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I had never seconded a motion. I had never voted. I had never even been invited to a board meeting. Ronan, I said. My voice sounded flat in the quiet room. Yeah? He didn't look up from his spreadsheet. I apparently approved a $12,000 grant while I was at work 3 years ago. Ronan spun his chair around. He rolled over to where I was sitting and looked at the binder. They listed you as present? For every meeting, I said, flipping through the pages. Here and here, I pointed to a date in 2022, September 10th. Attendees: Diane Ross, Grant Ross, Hazel Ross. That was the weekend I had the flu. I said, I was in bed with a fever of 102. I didn't leave my room for 3 days. Ronan took the binder from me. He looked at it with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a tumor. This is smart, he said. Evil, but smart. How is it smart? I asked. It is a lie. It is coverage. Ronan explained. If the IRS ever audited them, they could point to these minutes and say, look, we had a full board quorum. Decisions were made democratically. It wasn't just Diane and Grant treating the foundation like a piggy bank. Hazel was there too. She agreed to everything. He looked at me. They made you an accomplice, Hazel, without you even knowing it. I felt sick. It wasn't just that they had stolen money. It was that they had used my name, my clean, boring, reliable name, to sanitize their theft. They called me a charity case to my face, but on paper, they needed me to be a partner. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was a bruised purple. Maple Hollow looked peaceful. It was a lie, too. I need a copy of that page. I said. Ronan was already feeding it into the scanner. While we were digging for truth in a dusty office, my mother was fighting a very different kind of war out in the open. Maple Hollow was a small town. Information traveled faster than the speed of light, usually carried on the waves of polite conversation at the grocery store or the post office. I began to feel the shift a few days after the will reading. It started at the gas station. I was filling up my tank when Mrs. Gable, my landlady, pulled up to the pump next to me. Usually, she would wave and ask about my day. Today, she gave me a tight, concerned smile and looked away quickly. Then it was the clinic. My supervisor, a woman named Brenda, who had always praised my accuracy, called me into her office. Hazel, she said, shifting papers on her desk. I just wanted to check in. How are you holding up? I am fine. Brenda, just busy with the estate. Right, she said. She paused. Listen, if you need time off, for your health, we understand. I know grief can manifest in strange ways. We want to support you. I frowned. My health? Brenda, I haven't missed a day of work in 3 years. I know, she said quickly. But I heard well. Someone mentioned that you were struggling, that maybe the pressure was causing some confusion. Who told you that? I asked. Brenda looked uncomfortable. Oh, you know how people talk. I just wanted you to know we are here for you. I walked out of her office with my heart hammering. That night, I saw the post. It was on Diane's Facebook page. A photo of her and Evelyn, taken years ago. Diane looked radiant. Evelyn looked regal. The caption read, "Missing my mother so much today. It breaks my heart to see everything she built being threatened by confusion and bitterness. Please pray for our family as we navigate this difficult time. Mental health is a silent battle, and we are doing our best to support those who are not themselves right now." Family First Legacy. There were 140 comments. So sorry. Diane. Praying for you. It is so hard when family turns on family. Stay strong. Mental illness is a tragedy. She hadn't named me. She didn't have to. Everyone in town knew who those who are not themselves referred to. She was painting a picture of a grieving, unstable daughter lashing out at the stable, loving family. She was invalidating me before I even opened my mouth. If I spoke up now, I wouldn't be the whistleblower. I would be the crazy daughter having an episode. I put my phone down on the kitchen counter. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reply to the post and upload the PDF of the forged meeting minutes, but I couldn't. Not yet. Mara had warned me. Do not fire until you have enough ammunition to level the building. I forced myself to make tea. I forced myself to breathe. They think you are small. Evelyn had said, let them think I'm crazy. 2. It meant they wouldn't see me coming. 2 days later, Grant reached out. He didn't text. He called. His voice warm and casual, as if he hadn't tried to shout me down in a law office less than a week ago. Hayes, he said. How are you? I am fine. Grant, listen, I was thinking. We got off on the wrong foot at the reading. Tensions were high, grief, all that. I want to buy you a coffee. Let's talk. Brother to sister. I hesitated. My instinct was to say no. But Ronan had said we needed to know what they were planning. Okay, I said. Orchard Street Cafe, 4 o'clock. He was already there when I arrived. Sitting at a corner table with 2 lattes, he stood up and hugged me. It was a performance for the other patrons. See? The loving brother comforting the troubled sister. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that the expensive tan couldn't hide. I got you vanilla, he said, sliding a mug toward me. That is still your favorite, right? Thank you. He leaned back, crossing his arms. Look, Hazel, I am going to be honest. Mom is a mess. This freeze on the accounts, it is killing her. Not the money, but the principle. She feels like you are punishing her. I am not punishing anyone. I said calmly, I am auditing the books. That is my job as trustee. I know. Grant nodded sympathetically. And you are doing a great job, really. But let's be real. Hayes, this is a lot of work. You have the clinic. You have your own life to rebuild. You do not need this stress. He took a sip of his coffee. I want to help you, he said. How? He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. It was thin, just 3 pages, stapled at the corner. I had our family attorney draft this up. It is just a standard co-administration agreement. Basically, it brings me on as a co-trustee. I would handle the boring stuff, the bill payments, the vendor management, the investment calls. You would still be involved, of course, but you wouldn't have to deal with the daily grind. You could focus on your recovery, my recovery. He used the word deliberately. I picked up the document. I didn't read the whole thing, but my eyes scanned the legal jargon, granting Grant Thomas Ross full signatory authority, power to veto trustee decisions in matters of investment. Irrevocable appointment. It wasn't help. It was a coup. If I signed this, he could override any freeze I put in place. He could drain the accounts before the audit was even finished. I looked up at him. He was smiling. That winning, golden boy smile that had gotten him out of speeding tickets and failing grades his whole life. It is just to take the load off. Hazel, he said softly, we are worried about you. You look tired. I placed the document back on the table. No, I said. Grant's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went dead. No, I am not signing this. Grant, Hazel, be reasonable. You are a billing clerk. You do not know how to manage a $12 million estate. You are going to crash this thing into the ground. Then I will crash it. I said, but I am not signing. He stared at me. The mask of the caring brother dissolved. Underneath, I saw the panic. He needed access to that money. He needed it bad. Fine, he said. His voice was ice. Do it the hard way. But do not come crying to me when the lawyers eat you alive. Mom is trying to protect you. Hazel, but I am done protecting you. He stood up, buttoned his coat, and walked out of the cafe without looking back. I left the untouched latte on the table. The audit continued. We were finding patterns. But we needed the source. We had the what. The money was gone. But we needed the why and the how. One afternoon, I was going through the Foundation's bank statements from 2018. I found a recurring monthly payment of $145. Hollow Creek Storage. I knew Hollow Creek. It was a facility on the outskirts of town, a place where people stored old furniture and broken dreams. Why would the Foundation need a storage unit? I asked Ronan. They have a 2,000-square-foot office downtown. Maybe old files? Ronan suggested. Maybe. I called the storage facility. As the trustee, I had the legal right to access any unit in the Foundation's name. The manager, a guy named Pete, who sounded like he was smoking a cigarette while he talked, confirmed it. Yeah. Unit 402. Paid up through next month. Come on down. I went alone. I drove my rattling car out past the old textile mill. The storage facility was a row of orange metal doors behind a chain-link fence. Unit 402 was in the back row. I cut the padlock with the bolt cutters Pete had loaned me. Diane hadn't given me a key for this. Obviously, I rolled up the metal door. It shrieked in protest. The unit was full of boxes, dozens of them, old tax returns, event banners from galas past, boxes of plastic gala centerpieces. I started opening them. Most of it was junk, but in the corner, under a stack of old tablecloths, I found a plastic bin labeled administrative/internal. I popped the lid. Inside were binders, not financial binders, but strategy binders. I pulled one out. The spine read, Disbursement Strategy, Beneficiary Management, 2018 to 2020. I opened it. It wasn't numbers. It was emails. Printed out emails between Diane and a woman named Joyce, who I remembered was the Foundation's administrator before she retired to Florida. I sat on a stack of boxes and began to read. From Diane Ross to Joyce Miller. February 12, 2019. Subject, Hazel's request. Joyce. Regarding Hazel's request for assistance with her rent, we need to be careful here. If we give her the full amount to clear the debt, she stabilizes. If she stabilizes, she might leave Maple Hollow again. Mother wants her close. Even if she doesn't admit it, let's offer a small stipend instead. Something that keeps her head above water but doesn't build a raft. We need to maintain the narrative that she is fragile. It keeps expectations low. As long as she feels like the charity case, she will be grateful and quiet. It is for her own good. I read the email 3 times. As long as she feels like the charity case, she will be grateful and quiet. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just that they didn't care. It was a strategy. They had engineered my poverty. They had calculated exactly how much misery I could handle without breaking completely. Just to keep me trapped in their orbit. To keep me as a prop for their benevolence. To keep me small, as Evelyn had said. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to put the binder down. I gagged, dry heaving into the dusty air. I wasn't a failure. I was a prisoner. I grabbed the binder. I grabbed the whole box. I dragged it to my car, my breathing coming in short, jagged gasps. I sat in the driver's seat. I gripped the steering wheel. I wanted to drive to Marigold Lane and scream until my throat bled. I wanted to burn the house down. I started to cry, ugly, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the girl who had sat in that cold apartment in 2019, wondering what was wrong with her. I cried for the shame I had carried for 7 years. I cried for the wasted time. Then, the panic hit. They are going to destroy me. A voice in my head whispered, Grant said he is done protecting me. Diane is telling everyone I am crazy. I am one person against a fortress. I couldn't do this. I was just a billing clerk. I was small. I looked at the passenger seat. The binder was sitting there. Open. It keeps her grateful and quiet. The anger hit me then. It wasn't a hot flare. It was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I looked at my eyes in the rearview mirror. They were red, puffy. I took a deep breath. Then another. I was not grateful, and I was definitely not going to be quiet. I put the car in gear and drove straight to Mara's office. Mara listened to me in silence. I showed her the emails. I showed her the minutes. She looked at the binder, then at me. Hazel. She said carefully, "You need to prepare yourself. If we use this, if we expose this, they are going to escalate." "Let them," I said. "No, you do not understand." Mara leaned forward. "If they realize we have this proof of, let's call it emotional extortion, they will try to discredit the source. They have already started with the mental health rumors. Their next move will be an emergency petition to remove you as trustee based on incapacity. They will argue you are paranoid, delusional, unfit. So what do? We build a wall," Mara said. She pulled out a notepad. "I want you to get your personnel file from the clinic. Every performance review, every attendance record. I want a letter from your supervisor attesting to your competency." I nodded. "I can do that. I want your medical records. Everything. Showing you are physically and mentally sound. If you have a therapist, I want a statement from them." "I do not have a therapist," I said. "I couldn't afford one." "Good. Then we will get an independent evaluation, a preemptive one." Mara looked at the binder again. "We are turning your shame into evidence. Hazel, everything they said was a weakness. Your job, your instability, we are going to prove was resilience. You survived a system designed to crush you. That makes you the most competent person in this family." I spent the next 3 days gathering the paperwork. It was a strange feeling, photocopying my own life. Hazel Ross is a diligent, detail-oriented employee. Hazel Ross consistently meets or exceeds productivity targets. Hazel Ross has perfect attendance for 24 consecutive months. I wasn't the charity case. I was the one keeping the lights on. While I was building my defense, Ronan found the weapon. It was a Tuesday evening. I was at his office, cross-referencing the Foundation's check register. "Hazel," Ronan said. His voice was different. Tense. I looked up. "Remember the certified mail receipt? The one from 2019? The pink slip I had found in my closet?" "Yes." "I traced the tracking number." He said, "It took some doing, because the Postal Records Archive is a mess. But I found the sender." "Who was it?" "It was a law firm in Philadelphia." Ronan said, "Stein and Associates." I frowned. "I do not know them. They specialize in labor law." Ronan said, "Specifically, class action lawsuits." He turned his screen toward me. "In 2019, the logistics company you worked for, the one that laid you off, was sued for wrongful termination and failure to pay severance. They settled out of court for $4 million. I stared at him. "I never heard about that." "You wouldn't have," Ronan said, "because the notification letters were sent to the employees' last known addresses, or, in your case, your permanent address, Marigold Lane." Ronan clicked a file. "This is the disbursement log from the settlement fund." He pointed to a line. Claimant, Hazel Marie Ross. Settlement. Amount, $42,500. Status, paid. $42,000. That money would have saved me. It would have paid off my debt. It would have let me keep my apartment. It would have given me a cushion to find a new job. "Where did it go?" I whispered. Ronan opened one last document. It was a copy of a deposited check. It was made out to H. Ross on the back. It was endorsed with a signature that looked like mine, but wasn't, and underneath, the account number for the deposit. "I ran that account number," Ronan said grimly. "It is not yours. It is a trust account titled H. Ross Support Trust. It sounds like it is for me." I said, "It sounds like it." Ronan agreed, "But the signatories on the account are Diane Ross and Grant Ross." He looked at me, his eyes full of anger. "Hazel, they intercepted your settlement. They forged your signature. They deposited it into an account they controlled. And then, he pulled up the transaction history for the H. Ross Support Trust. Withdrawal. October 14th, 2019. Amount, $18,740. 2. Coastal Horizon Properties. Withdrawal. November 2nd, 2019. Amount, $5,000. 2. Ross Family Cash. Withdrawal. December 10th, 2019. Amount: $3,000. To Mercedes-Benz. Financial. They didn't just steal from the foundation. Ronan said quietly, they stole from you. They took the money that was legally yours, used it to pay for their vacation and their car payments, and then told you they couldn't afford to help you with rent. I stared at the screen. The pattern was complete. They had taken my lifeline. They had stolen my safety. And then they had offered me crumbs from my own loaf of bread and demanded I thank them for it. Every time Grant had covered my dinner, every time Diane had bought me a sensible coat for Christmas, they were buying it with my own money. I felt a clarity so sharp it felt like it could cut glass. This wasn't just about the will anymore. This was a crime. A federal crime. Mail fraud, wire fraud, theft. I looked at Ronan. Do we have enough? I asked. Ronan nodded. We have enough to bury them. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a text from Diane. She must have sensed the silence, sensed that the control was slipping. Stop digging. If you loved Grandma, you would stop. You are tearing this family apart. I looked at the message. I looked at the words. If you loved Grandma. They always used love as a shield. They used it to hide the knife. I thought about Evelyn. I thought about the key she gave me. I thought about the letter. You are the only Ross with a spine. She knew. She knew they had stolen from me. She couldn't tell me while she was alive. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she was ashamed of what she had raised. But she had given me the map to find it myself. I looked at the text one last time. If you loved Grandma, you would stop. I realized then that love wasn't about protecting the lie. Love was about burning the lie down so the truth could breathe. I didn't reply. I put the phone in my pocket. I looked at Ronan. I am not stopping. I said, I looked at the stack of evidence, the forged minutes, the emails, the stolen settlement. I am going to finish it. The sheriff's deputy who walked into the Maple Hollow Community Clinic was a man I knew. His name was Officer Miller, and 2 years ago, I had helped him sort out a billing error regarding his son's cast. He was a kind man with a thick mustache and tired eyes. When he walked toward the billing department, he took off his hat. He looked pained. Hazel, he said, stopping at my cubicle. The office went silent. The hum of the computers seemed to drop away. My supervisor, Brenda, stood up in her glass-walled office, watching. My coworkers, who usually ignored me, swiveled their chairs. Officer Miller held out a thick envelope. I am sorry. Hazel, he said quietly, I have to serve you this. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, as if gravity had suddenly doubled. I took the envelope. Is it criminal? I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands were not. No, Officer Miller said. It is a civil petition. Emergency hearing. Thank you. Officer. He nodded and left quickly, clearly hating his job in that moment. I looked at the envelope. County Court of Maple Hollow. Petitioner. Diane Ross. Respondent. Hazel Marie Ross. I opened it right there. Standing in the middle of the office while 12 people watched. Petition for removal of trustee for cause. Allegations. Mental instability. Financial incompetence. Erratic behavior indicating a break from reality. It cited my history of financial ruin in 2019. It cited recent public outbursts. It claimed my appointment was the result of undue influence over an elderly woman in cognitive decline. It was a masterstroke of small-town warfare. Diane hadn't just sued me, she had humiliated me. She had served me at work to ensure that by 5 o'clock, everyone in Maple Hollow would know that Hazel Ross was being sued by her own mother for being crazy. Brenda walked out of her office. She looked at the papers in my hand. Hazel, she said gently, maybe you should take the rest of the day. She wasn't being kind. She was managing risk. A billing clerk being sued for financial incompetence was a liability. I looked at her. I am fine. Brenda, I said, I have 3 more claims to process. I sat down. I put the papers in my drawer. I turned back to my computer. I typed my password 3 times before I got it right. But I did not leave. If I left, I was running, and I was done running. Mara Klein read the petition with the expression of a woman who had smelled something rotting in the fridge. "This is standard," she said, tossing the document onto her desk. "It is the scorched earth policy. They throw everything at the wall: instability, incompetence, malice, and hope something sticks. Or, more likely, they hope the shame makes you quit before we even get to court." She looked at me. "How are you handling it?" "I am angry." I said. "Good," Mara said. "Anger is fuel. Shame is a brake. Stay angry." She opened her laptop. "We are going to file a response by tomorrow morning, but we are not just going to deny their claims. We are going to bury them in paper." She started listing tasks. "I want your credit report. Hazel, I want the last 3 years of your bank statements showing every bill paid on time. I want your performance reviews from the clinic. I have them," I said. I pulled a folder from my bag. I had spent the night copying them. Mara took the folder. She flipped through it. Rating: exceeds expectations. Attendance: perfect. Accuracy: 99%. She smiled. "This is excellent." It is hard to argue someone is mentally unstable when they are processing complex medical billing codes with 99% accuracy for 3 years straight. She made a note. "Now, we go on the offensive. I am filing a motion to compel." "What is that?" "It means we ask the judge to force Diane to hand over the records she has been hiding." Mara explained. "Specifically, the credit card statements for the foundation and the access codes for the bank accounts she has refused to share. We frame it simply. If Diane Ross has nothing to hide, why is she obstructing the trustee's audit?" She looked at me. They fired a warning shot. "Hazel, we are going to fire a cannonball." 2 days later, the trap was set. It came in the form of a group email from Grant. Subject line: Family Reconciliation Dinner. "Dearest family, it has been a hard few weeks. Grief makes us do things we do not mean. Mom and I want to put the ugliness behind us. We are hosting a dinner at the Meadow Ridge Inn this Saturday. Hazel is coming, and we are going to clear the air. We want to move forward as a united family to honor Grandma's legacy." He hadn't asked me if I was coming. He had announced it. If I didn't go, I was the bitter, unstable sister refusing the olive branch. If I went, I was walking into a room where the script had already been written for my apology. I called Mara. "Do not go," was my first thought. Mara said, But, if you do not go, Grant controls the narrative," she said. "He gets to stand at the head of the table and tell everyone how sad it is that you are too unwell to join them. So I have to go." I said, "You have to go." Mara agreed. "But you do not go to apologize. You go to testify." The Meadow Ridge Inn was the kind of place where the napkins were folded into swans and the water glasses were kept perpetually full by waiters who moved like ghosts. The private dining room was full. Diane had invited everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even a few friends of the family like Celeste Rourke, the president of the local garden club and Diane's oldest ally. When I walked in, the conversation stopped. Grant stood up. He was wearing a navy suit, looking every inch the benevolent patriarch he was trying to become. "Hazel," he announced, spreading his arms. "You made it." He walked over to hug me. I didn't step back, but I didn't lean in. I let him pat my shoulder. "I am so glad you came. Hayes," he whispered loudly enough for the room to hear. "Mom is really hoping we can fix this." He led me to a seat, not at the kids' table this time, but right in the middle, across from Diane. Diane looked tired, but her makeup was flawless. She gave me a tight, tragic smile. "Hello." "Hazel," she said softly. "Thank you for coming." I sat down. I placed my purse on the floor. Inside was a single file folder. The dinner began with a prayer led by Uncle Robert, asking for healing and wisdom and the restoration of family bonds. Then came the appetizers and the performance. Aunt Linda leaned across the table. "We have been so worried about you." "Hazel," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "This lawsuit. It must be so stressful. Diane only wants what is best for you. You know, Sometimes we need someone to step in when we are not. Coping well. I sliced my bread. I am coping fine. Aunt Linda. I said, I am working full-time. I am paying my bills, and I am auditing the estate. Diane sighed. A long, suffering sound. Hazel, please, she said. Let's not talk about business tonight. Tonight is about family. We just want you to know that we forgive you. The room went quiet. The waiters froze. Forgive me? I asked. For the confusion, Grant said smoothly. For the aggressive stance you have taken. We know it is not really you. We know you are lashing out because of Yev. Well, the past. He looked around the table, gathering allies. We are willing to drop the petition. Hazel, Grant continued, if you just agree to the co-trustee arrangement, we can make this all go away. We can go back to being a family. I looked at them. I looked at the cousins who had mocked me. I looked at the aunts who had pitied me. They were all nodding, urging me with their eyes to take the deal. Be the charity case again. Be small. Be safe. I put my fork down. I cannot do that. Grant, I said. Diane's face hardened. Why not? Because you are too proud? No, I said. Because I found the invoice for the Outer Banks rental. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't awkward. It was dangerous. Diane blinked. What? October 12th, 2019. I said. My voice was calm, projecting to the corners of the room. The week I was evicted. The week you told me the foundation had no funds to help me. You spent $18,740 on a rental home in North Carolina. Diane laughed. It was a high, brittle sound. Oh, Hazel, that was a donor retreat. We were hosting potential benefactors. It was work. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I took out a single sheet of paper. I have the guest list. Mom, I said, I read from the paper. Diane Ross, Grant Ross, 3 guests listed as private, and a charge for, let me see. Private surf lessons, $400. I looked up. Did the potential benefactors enjoy the surf lessons? Grant's face turned a dark, ugly red. This is inappropriate, he snapped. You are twisting facts. Celeste Rourke spoke up from the end of the table. She was a woman who wore pearls like armor. Hazel, really, she said, her voice sharp. I have known your mother for 30 years. She has run that foundation with absolute integrity. You are embarrassing yourself with these accusations. I turned to Celeste. Hello, Mrs. Rourke, I said. I looked at my paper again. While we are discussing integrity, I have a question about the consulting fees you received last year. Celeste froze. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth. $12,000. I read, paid to Rourke Consulting Group for community strategy. Can you tell me what strategy you provided? There is no written report, no emails, just a check. Celeste lowered her fork. Her face went pale. I advised on the gala. She stammered. The gala planner was paid separately. I said, $12,000. Mrs. Rourke, that is a lot of money for advice that was never written down. I looked around the table. Does anyone else want to discuss their consulting fees? No one moved. Cousin Mike looked at his plate. Uncle Robert suddenly found his water glass very interesting. Diane stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. Get out, she hissed. She wasn't the tragic mother anymore. She was the shark Evelyn had warned me about. You are ungrateful, spiteful, she sputtered. Get out of my sight. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I am leaving, I said, but I'm not resigning, and I am not settling. I looked at Grant. Enjoy the dinner. Grant, I hope you paid for it with your own money this time. I walked out of the private room, through the silent restaurant, and into the cool night air. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack a rib, but my hands were steady. The next morning, Ronan Pierce called me. Can you come in? He asked. I found the smoking gun. When I arrived at his office, Ronan was pacing. He looked like he hadn't slept. So, the rental house and the consulting fees are bad, he said, ushering me to the desk. They are misuse of funds. but they are technically arguable. They could claim bad judgment. He tapped the screen. This, however, is fraud. He pointed to a vendor name I had seen on the ledger a dozen times. Everwell Outreach Solutions. I thought they were a counseling service. I said, we pay them $5,000 a month. So did I. Ronan said, until I tried to find their website. They do not have one. He pulled up a document. I pulled their incorporation papers. Everwell Outreach Solutions was registered in 2018. The registered agent is a lawyer in Delaware. But look at the mailing address. He pointed to the line. Unit B, 459 Elm Street, Maple Hollow. I know that address. I said, that is the UPS store next to the laundromat. Exactly, Ronan said. It is a mailbox. He clicked another file. Now look at the invoices. Strategic planning, community impact assessment, youth outreach coordination, vague, buzzword services. He looked at me. Hazel. I cross-referenced the bank routing number for Everwell. He took a breath. It deposits into an account at Maple Hollow Savings and Trust. The signatories on that account are not counselors. They are Diane Ross and Grant Ross. I stared at the screen. They created a fake company. I whispered. They created a shell. Ronan corrected. They bill the foundation for services that never happen. They approve the invoices themselves, and they pocket the money. $5,000 a month for 5 years. I did the math in my head. $300,000. I said, give or take, Ronan said, plus the settlement money they stole from you, plus the lifestyle expenses. He leaned back. This is prison time. Hazel, if we take this to the judge, they are not just losing the trust, they are going to jail. I sat there, staring at the glowing screen. Jail, my mother, my brother. I thought about Diane teaching me to tie my shoes. I thought about Grant protecting me from a bully in 3rd grade, before he became one himself. It was one thing to want the truth. It was another thing to send your family to prison. What happens to the foundation? I asked. If this comes out, it implodes, Ronan said. The state attorney general will freeze everything. The assets will be seized during the investigation. The grants stop. The scholarships stop. The reputation of the Ross name becomes toxic. I thought about the Maple Hollow Adult Learning Center. I thought about the food pantry that relied on our quarterly check. If I expose them, I destroy the charity too. I said, Ronan nodded. That is the cost. I stood up. I need to think. I drove to the north side of town. It was the part of Maple Hollow tourists didn't see. Cracked sidewalks, houses with peeling paint, the lingering shadow of the factory closure. I parked in front of the Beacon Youth Center. It was a recipient of the foundation. I walked inside. It was noisy, chaotic, and alive. Kids were playing basketball in a gym that smelled of floor wax and sweat. In a classroom, a tutor was helping a teenager with algebra. I saw a plaque on the wall. Supported by the Evelyn Ross Community Grant Foundation. A woman walked up to me. She looked tired but kind. Can I help you? I am Hazel. I said, Hazel Ross. Her face lit up. Oh, Ms. Ross. She grabbed my hand. I cannot tell you how much your family means to us. The grant you gave us last winter. It paid for the heating oil. We would have had to close without it. She led me around, showing me the computer lab, the art supplies. Your grandmother was a saint, the woman said. She used to come here. You know, she would sit in the back and just watch the kids. She really cared. I looked at the kids. I looked at the computers that were 5 years old but working. The charity was real. Evelyn had tried to do good. She had poured her heart and her fortune into this town, and her daughter and grandson had treated it like a personal ATM, skimming off the top while basking in the praise for being philanthropists. If I blew it all up, the heating oil money would stop. The tutor would be fired. These kids would have nowhere to go. But if I let it continue, the theft would continue. I realized then what Evelyn had been asking me to do. She didn't just want me to catch them. She wanted me to save the work. She wanted me to cut out the rot without killing the tree. I walked back to my car. I called Mara. I know what I want to do. I said, 2 days before the court hearing, I received a call from Diane's lawyer. He asked for a meeting. Without counsel, I told him no. If he wanted to talk, he could come to Mara's office. They arrived at 4 o'clock. Diane was with him. She looked smaller than she had at the dinner. The rage was gone, replaced by a tight, frantic energy. Mara sat next to me. "We have a proposal." The lawyer said. He slid a document across the table. "Diane is willing to withdraw the petition for removal. She is willing to acknowledge Hazel as the rightful trustee." Mara raised an eyebrow. "That is generous, considering the law is already on our side. What is the catch?" "Hazel resigns." The lawyer said. "Immediately, she appoints Grant as the successor. In exchange, the family will provide Hazel with a settlement." He named a figure, $200,000. Diane leaned forward. "It is a lot of money." "Hazel," she said. Her voice was trembling. "You could leave Maple Hollow. You could go to New York or Chicago. Start over. Buy a nice apartment. No debts. No stress." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "We just want peace. Hazel, we want to stop fighting. Just sign the paper. Take the money, and let us handle things. You do not belong here. You know that." I looked at the check. $200,000. It was enough to fix everything. I could pay off my medical debt instantly. I could pay for my certification. I could buy a car that didn't rattle. I could leave this town and the whispers and the charity case label behind forever. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. Peace, quiet, an escape hatch. I looked at Diane. She looked terrified. She knew what I had found. She knew about the rental. She suspected I knew about Everwell. She was trying to buy my silence. I touched the letter in my pocket. Evelyn's letter. I carried it everywhere now. "You do not need revenge. You need the truth to be real. If I took the money, the truth would disappear. The charity case narrative would become permanent history. Hazel Ross took a payout and ran. Hazel Ross couldn't hack it, and Everwell would keep billing. The skimming would continue. The rot would spread until there was nothing left of Evelyn's legacy but a hollow shell." I picked up the settlement offer. I looked at the number. I looked at Diane. I remember 2019. "Mom," I said softly. Diane flinched. "I remember asking for $3,000, and you told me to stand on my own 2 feet. I tore the document in half." The sound was loud in the quiet room. I tore it again, and again. "I am not resigning," I said. Diane stood up. "You are making a mistake. You are going to ruin us." "No," I said. "You ruined yourselves. I am just turning on the lights." I stood up. "See you in court. Mother." The morning of the hearing was gray and rainy, a fitting backdrop for the end of the world. I dressed in my best suit, a charcoal gray blazer I had bought at a thrift store and tailored myself. I pulled my hair back. I wore no jewelry except a small watch. Mara met me at the courthouse steps. She was carrying a heavy box of files. Ronan was with her, carrying 3 binders. "Are you ready?" Mara asked. I looked at the courthouse. It was a looming stone building where justice was supposed to happen. "I am scared," I admitted. "Good," Ronan said. "Being scared means you are paying attention." We walked inside. The hallway was crowded. I saw Diane and Grant huddled with their lawyer near the water fountain. Diane was wearing black, looking like a grieving widow. Grant was pacing, checking his phone. When they saw me, they stopped. Diane's eyes went to the box Mara was carrying. I saw the fear flicker there. We walked into the courtroom. It was small, smelling of old wood and floor polish. The judge, a woman named Judge Halloway, was already on the bench, reading a file. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table, because technically, I was the one responding to their attack. The bailiff called the case. Ross versus Ross. Diane's lawyer stood up. He launched into his opening statement. He painted a picture of a family in crisis, of a daughter who had snapped under the pressure of grief and past failures. He used words like benevolent intervention and fiduciary risk. He spoke well. He sounded reasonable. If I didn't know the truth, I would have believed him. Then it was Mara's turn. She stood up. She didn't give a speech. She just looked at the judge. Your Honor, she said, the defense will not be making an opening statement. The trustee, Hazel Ross, wishes to address the court directly regarding the financial status of the estate. The judge looked surprised. Ms. Ross? You wish to testify? Yes, Your Honor, I said, standing up. Diane's lawyer jumped up. Objection. This is irregular. Ms. Ross should speak through counsel. It is a hearing for removal based on incompetence, Judge Holloway said calmly. I think hearing from the trustee directly is exactly what is needed to determine her competence. Overruled. I walked to the witness stand. I sat down. The wood was hard. The microphone hummed. I looked out at the courtroom. I saw Diane, pale and rigid. I saw Grant, sweating. I saw the few reporters in the back row, pens poised. I opened my binder. Ms. Ross, the judge said, you may begin. I took a breath. Your Honor, I said. My voice was clear. My family claims I am unstable. They claim I am incompetent. They claim I am a charity case who needs to be managed. I paused. For 7 years. I believed them. But 2 weeks ago, I began an audit of the Evelyn Ross Community Grant Foundation. I looked at Diane. I am not here to defend my sanity. I said, I am here to report a crime. Diane gasped. Her lawyer tried to stand up, but Grant pulled him down, whispering frantically. I turned the page in my binder. I would like to enter into Evidence Exhibit A. I said, an invoice from a company called Everwell Outreach Solutions. I lifted the paper, and I would like to explain to the court exactly where the money went. I didn't hide behind Mara. I didn't hide behind the settlement. I started to read the numbers, and with every number, the silence in the room grew heavier, until the only sound left was the truth, finally being read out loud. The courtroom in Hawthorne County smelled of damp wool, floor wax, and the nervous sweat of people whose lives were about to change. It was a Wednesday morning, but the room was packed, in a town the size of Maple Hollow. A lawsuit between members of its most prominent philanthropic family was not just legal proceedings, it was theater. I arrived 20 minutes early. I walked in flanked by Mara Klein and Ronan Pierce. We looked less like a legal team and more like a demolition crew. Mara carried a banker's box filled with the files we had subpoenaed. Ronan carried his laptop and 3 thick binders color-coded by the severity of the fraud. I carried nothing but my purse and the small, heavy key Evelyn had given me, which sat in my pocket like a talisman. Diane arrived 5 minutes later. She made an entrance. She was dressed in black wool, modest and expensive, with a single strand of pearls. She looked frail, leaning heavily on Grant's arm. Grant was wearing his best suit, his jaw set in a line of grim determination. Behind them trailed a phalanx of supporters, Celeste Rourke from the Garden Club, the pastor from the First Methodist Church, and 3 of my aunts who had been sharing Diane's Facebook posts about family betrayal all week. They took the table on the right. We took the table on the left. The aisle between us felt like a canyon. Diane did not look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the judge's bench, dabbing occasionally at dry eyes with a handkerchief. It was a perfect performance of the grieving matriarch forced into a corner by a wayward child. Judge Holloway entered. The bailiff called out, "All rise." We stood. The air in the room tightened. The hearing was technically about the petition to remove me as trustee. The burden of proof was on Diane. She had to prove that I was unfit, mentally unstable, or acting with malice against the estate. Her attorney, a man named Mr. Sterling, who had a voice like oiled gravel, stood up. "Your Honor," he began, resting his hands on the podium. "This is a tragedy, a simple tragedy. We have here a family that is grieving the loss of their beloved grandmother, Evelyn Ross, and in the midst of this grief, they have been forced to intervene to protect her legacy." He turned to point at me. "The respondent, Hazel Ross, has a documented history of financial instability. In 2019, she suffered a complete financial collapse. She was evicted. She was pursued by creditors. She was, frankly, unable to care for herself. Her family stepped in to support her. They gave her a home. They gave her purpose. He paused for effect. And how has she repaid them? By launching a vindictive, paranoid campaign against her own mother and brother, by freezing the assets of a charitable foundation that supports orphans and the elderly, by making wild, unfounded accusations of theft. He looked at the judge, his face full of sorrow. We are not asking for punishment, Your Honor. We are asking for relief. We are asking that the court remove Ms. Ross from a burden she is clearly mentally ill-equipped to carry, and return the stewardship of the foundation to the people who have run it successfully for decades, Diane Ross and Grant Ross. I sat there, my hands clasped on the table. My throat felt tight, as if a hand were squeezing it. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Mentally ill-equipped, paranoid, vindictive. I could feel the eyes of the town on my back. I knew what they were thinking. Poor Diane. Having to deal with that ungrateful girl. I wanted to shrink. I wanted to hide under the table. The old shame, the shame of being the charity case, washed over me in a cold wave. Then I felt a hand on my arm. It was Ronan. He didn't look at me. He was looking at his binder. But his grip was firm. Facts. He whispered. Just facts. I took a deep breath. I looked at the binder in front of him. Inside were the bank statements. Inside was the truth. I grounded myself. I wasn't the girl who had cried in her car in 2019. I was the trustee. Diane's attorney finished his opening statement and sat down. Diane patted his hand, looking tragically vindicated. Judge Holloway looked at our table. Ms. Klein? Mara stood up. She walked to the podium. She didn't use flowery language. She didn't talk about tragedy or grief. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and sharp, the petitioner claims that Hazel Ross is unfit to manage the estate because she is paranoid. The definition of paranoia is a delusion of persecution that is not based in reality. Mara turned and walked back to our table. She picked up the first binder. However, if the persecution is real, then the reaction is not paranoia. It is due diligence. She handed the binder to the bailiff. We are submitting into evidence Exhibit A. These are the board meeting minutes for the Evelyn Ross Community Grant Foundation from 2021 through 2023. The judge opened the binder. As you can see, Your Honor, Hazel Ross is listed as present and voting at 12 separate board meetings. Her name appears on motions to approve grants. Her name appears on attendance rolls. Mara paused. We are also submitting Exhibit B. These are the employment time cards for Hazel Ross from the Maple Hollow Community Clinic for those same dates. The judge flipped the page. On every single date that Hazel Ross was allegedly sitting in a board meeting voting on grants, she was actually at work, clocked in, often working double shifts. Mara looked at Diane. The petitioner forged the respondent's attendance to create a false quorum. This is not a clerical error. It is fraud. A murmur went through the courtroom. Diane stiffened. Grant whispered something to Mr. Sterling, who frowned. Mara didn't stop. Exhibit C, she announced, bank records for the foundation's operating account. Ronan stood up then. He was sworn in as an expert witness. He walked to the stand with his laptop. He plugged it into the court's projector system. A spreadsheet appeared on the wall behind the judge. It was a sea of numbers. But Ronan zoomed in on a specific column. Your Honor, Ronan said, his voice calm and professorial. A charitable foundation is strictly regulated by the IRS. Funds must be used for charitable purposes or reasonable administrative expenses. He pointed to a line item. Here we have a charge of $2,300 to Designers Guild. It is coded as office supplies. He clicked a button. An invoice appeared. This is the receipt from Designers Guild. It lists the purchase of 2 silk armchairs and a custom ottoman. He looked at the judge. I visited the foundation's office yesterday. These items are not there. However, I believe if the court were to visit Diane Ross's private residence on Marigold Lane, they might find them in the sunroom. The courtroom gasped. It was a small sound, but it was distinct. Diane's face flushed a blotchy red. She leaned forward, whispering furiously to her lawyer. Mr. Sterling stood up. Objection. This is speculation. Sustained on the location of the chairs, Judge Holloway said dryly, but the invoice speaks for itself. Continue. Ronan moved to the next slide. This brings us to the most significant outlay of funds, he said. A vendor known as Everwell Outreach Solutions. He pulled up the invoices. Strategic planning, $5,000. Youth outreach, $5,000 over the last 5 years. The foundation has paid Everwell Outreach Solutions a total of $312,000, Ronan said. He paused. Everwell has no website, no employees, no office. Its mailing address is a rented mailbox at the UPS store on Elm Street. He clicked again, and the bank account for Everwell is controlled by 2 signatories, Diane Ross and Grant Ross. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. $300,000, Ronan repeated, funneled from a charity for orphans into a shell company owned by the petitioner. Grant was staring at the table, his face pale. Diane was gripping her pearl necklace as if she were trying to strangle it. Mr. Sterling looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. But we weren't done. Mara stood up again. Your Honor, these are crimes against the Foundation, but the petitioner's argument relies on the claim that Hazel Ross is financially incompetent because she suffered a collapse in 2019. She walked to the witness stand where I was sitting. Hazel, she said, did you receive a settlement from your former employer in 2019? I leaned into the microphone. I did not know about it. I said, I thought I had received nothing. Mara nodded. She turned to the judge. Exhibit D. She handed a single sheet of paper to the bailiff. This is a copy of a check issued by the Stein Law Firm in October of 2019. It is made out to Hazel Ross. The amount is $42,500. Mara turned to the screen. Ronan pulled up the image of the check. The endorsement on the back is signed H. Ross. Mara looked at me. Is that your signature? Hazel? No. I said, and the account it was deposited into? Is that your account? No, I said. I have never seen that account before. Ronan clicked the final slide. This account, titled the H. Ross Support Trust, was opened by Diane Ross. Mara let that hang in the air. Your Honor, in October of 2019, Hazel Ross was facing eviction. She asked her mother for a loan of $3,000. Her mother told her the family had no money. Mara pointed at the screen. 2 days later, Diane Ross withdrew $18,740 from this stolen settlement fund to pay for a vacation rental in the Outer Banks. Diane let out a sound. It was a strangled cry, involuntary and sharp. Lies, she shouted. Standing up, she looked wild. Her composure shattered. I was holding it for her. She was unstable. I was protecting the money so she wouldn't waste it. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. Ms. Ross, sit down. I was protecting her, Diane screamed, pointing at me. Her face was twisted, ugly with panic. She would have blown it all. She is a mess. She has always been a mess. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had watched me pack my life into cardboard boxes while she sat on a beach paid for with my survival money. I didn't feel the old fear. I didn't feel the desire to apologize. I felt a profound, quiet sadness. She truly believed it. She had told herself the lie for so long, that I was the problem and she was the savior, that she couldn't see the thief in the mirror. Diane, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt, the judge barked. Grant pulled his mother down. He was whispering to her, his eyes darting around the room, seeing the shock on the faces of the garden club members, the horror on the face of the pastor. He knew the social capital of the Ross family had just evaporated. Judge Holloway looked at the evidence. She looked at Diane, who was now sobbing into her hands. Real tears this time, tears of terror. Then she looked at me. The petition to remove Hazel Ross as trustee is denied, the judge said. Her voice was cold. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented regarding the Everwell account and the settlement diversion. I am ordering an immediate freeze of all personal assets belonging to Diane Ross and Grant Ross, pending a criminal referral to the district attorney's office. Grant's head snapped up. Criminal referral? The judge ignored him. I am also ordering the production of all remaining personal emails and correspondence related to the Foundation's management. It was over. We had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. There was no cheering. Just the heavy, suffocating reality of a family destroying itself in public. But I had one more thing to do. Your Honor? I said. I stood up. The judge looked at me. Yes. Ms. Ross? There is one more piece of evidence. I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed envelope. The red wax was still unbroken. This is a statement written by Evelyn Ross. I said. Her will stipulates that it is to be opened and read into the record only if her beneficiaries challenge the estate plan. Diane looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed and wide. Grandma knew. Grant whispered. The realization washed over his face. He looked at the envelope as if it were a bomb. I walked to the bailiff and handed him the envelope. He handed it to the judge. Judge Holloway inspected the seal. She nodded. She took a letter opener and sliced the top of the envelope. The sound of tearing paper was loud in the silent room. She unfolded the letter. She read it silently for a moment. Her eyebrows went up. She handed it back to the bailiff. Please read it into the record. Ms. Ross, the judge said. I took the letter. My hands were shaking. Just a little. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was the same spidery script from the birthday cards and the recipe cards. I cleared my throat. To my family. I read, if this letter is being read, it means that Diane or Grant has tried to remove Hazel as the trustee. I expected this. In fact, I counted on it. I heard a gasp from the gallery. I have known about the theft for a long time. I read, I knew about the consulting fees. I knew about the rental houses. I knew about the settlement check you stole from Hazel in 2019. Diane made a low, moaning sound. I could have stopped you then. The letter continued. But if I had exposed you while I was alive, you would have claimed I was confused. You would have fought me. You would have destroyed the foundation to save your own skins. So I waited, and I watched Hazel. I felt tears prick my eyes. I blinked them back. You call her the charity case, I read. You mock her for her small life. You think she is weak because she takes your insults with a smile. But you are wrong. Hazel is not the charity case. Hazel is the measuring stick. I wanted to see how you treated someone who had nothing to offer you. I wanted to see if you would help her when she was down, or if you would kick her. I wanted to see if you had any honor left. You failed. You stole from the most vulnerable member of this family to fund your own vanity, and because you have challenged her now, you have triggered the full audit that I mandated. You have exposed yourselves. Hazel is the only one of you who understands what money is for. It is not for status. It is for service. That is why I left her the key. Do not hate her for catching you. Hate yourselves for making it necessary. Signed, Evelyn Ross. I lowered the paper. The silence in the courtroom was different now. It wasn't tense. It was final. I looked at my family. Diane was staring at me, but the rage was gone. In its place was a look of total, devastating shame. She looked old. She looked stripped. She realized that her mother, the woman she had pretended to worship, had seen right through her for years. Grant was looking at the floor, his hands clenched in his lap. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just a thief in a suit. The people in the gallery, the friends, the supporters, were shifting in their seats, pulling away from the Ross table as if failure were contagious. The label charity case was dead. Evelyn had killed it from the grave. I handed the letter back to the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. The walk out of the courthouse was a blur. Mara and Ronan flanked me like bodyguards. We pushed through the heavy double doors into the bright, blinding afternoon light. The reporters were there. Not just the local paper now, but a crew from the county news station. They surged forward, microphones extended. Ms. Ross, is it true your mother is facing criminal charges? Ms. Ross, what will happen to the foundation? Hazel, how do you feel about your grandmother's letter? I didn't answer. I just kept walking down the stone steps. Hazel. A hand grabbed my elbow. I turned. It was Grant. He had run out after us. His tie was crooked. He looked desperate. Hazel. Wait, he panted. Ronan stepped forward, blocking him. But I put a hand on Ronan's arm. It is okay, I said. I looked at my brother. What do you want? Grant? He looked at the cameras, then back at me. He lowered his voice to a frantic whisper. Hazel, listen, we can still fix this. Fix what? I asked. The optics, he hissed. We can put out a joint statement. We can say it was a misunderstanding, an accounting error. We can say Grandma was, using metaphors. I stared at him. He still didn't get it. He was standing on the precipice of prison, and he was still worried about the press release. If we stick together, Grant pleaded, his eyes wet, we can save the reputation. We are family. Hazel, family protects family. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the calculation. He didn't want a sister. He wanted an accomplice. I thought about the Beacon Youth Center. I thought about the kids playing basketball. I thought about the heating oil. Family protects family. I repeated, yes, Grant said, nodding eagerly. Yes, that is why I am doing this. Grant, I said, I am protecting Grandma's family. The real one, the one she chose, the people you stole from. Grant recoiled as if I had slapped him. I stepped back. It is not a misunderstanding. Grant, it is a felony, and I am not going to help you hide it. I turned away from him. I looked at the town of Maple Hollow spread out before me, the diner where I had eaten alone, the clinic where I had worked double shifts, the small apartment above the garage. I saw the reporters waiting at the bottom of the steps. I could walk past them. I could get in Mara's car, drive away, and let the lawyers handle the rest. I could take my settlement, not the money they offered, but the peace of knowing I was right, and leave. I could start over in a new city where no one knew the name Ross, or I could finish it. I could walk up to those microphones and tell the whole story. I could tell them about the rental house and the settlement check and the shell company. I could make sure that everyone in this town knew exactly who Evelyn Ross was and who she wasn't. I looked at Mara. She nodded. Just once. I took a breath. The air smelled of rain and wet pavement. It smelled clean. I adjusted my grip on the binder. I smoothed my blazer. I stepped away from my lawyers. I walked toward the microphones. The reporters quieted down as I approached. The cameras zoomed in. My name is Hazel Ross, I said. My voice didn't shake. And I have a statement to make. I didn't know where I would go after this. I didn't know if I would stay in Maple Hollow or if I would drive until the gas tank was empty. I didn't know if I would ever speak to my mother again. But as the flashbulbs popped and the questions started, I knew one thing for certain. I was not a victim. I was not a failure. And I was never, ever going to be a charity case again. I looked into the camera lens, and I began to speak. Thank you so much for listening to Hazel's story. It's been a long journey from the billing department of the Maple Hollow Clinic to the steps of the county courthouse. I hope you enjoyed this tale of justice, resilience, and the power of truth. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed seeing Hazel take down the House of Cards, please subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel. We have many more stories of justice served cold coming your way. Finally, tell me in the comments, do you think Hazel should stay in Maple Hollow and run the foundation? Or should she take her freedom and start a new life somewhere else? I'll be reading your thoughts in English. Until next time.